I had been in love with Jaden for a full 10 years. I helped him deal with the matter of hitting someone while riding a bike and also got him into a major law firm. After getting married, in order to have a baby with him, I underwent in vitro fertilization for 3 years. However, on the day when I was diagnosed as successfully pregnant, he left me behind and rushed to take his sister's son to the hospital. It was only on that day that I found out that the sister he cared so much about was just an adopted sister. On my way back, I was distracted and got into a car accident, resulting in the death of both me and the baby in my womb. I was reborn again on the day when I decided to help him deal with the matter of hitting someone while riding a bike. Just like in my previous life, Juno tightly grasped Jaden's hand and shielded him behind her. Isn't it all your fault that things have turned out like this? Why don't you help my brother when you're so rich? This time, I won't compromise myself anymore. If it weren't for you, would we have gone out in such bad weather? Isn't it all your fault that things have turned out like this? Why don't you help my brother when you're so rich? My brother is so outstanding. If this incident is recorded in his file, can you afford to take responsibility for ruining his life? After being reborn, I felt dizzy and in my ears was Juno's deliberately shrill voice, which was as unpleasant as noise. It was on this day that I had an appointment with Jaden and planned to introduce him to my uncle, a partner of the top law firm in China. On their way here, they knocked down an old grandma with a strange temper while riding bikes. The grandma threatened to file a complaint to Jaden's school, demanded an exorbitant amount of compensation for mental damages, and even wanted Jaden to go to prison. There had been snow these 2 days. In my previous life, Juno shifted all the blame onto me. She continued to shout, "You're so hypocritical. You said you liked my brother. You're such a miser." Juno was 6 years younger than Jaden and was only in the 2nd year of senior high school. Her face was still childish, but she wore heavy smoky makeup. In my previous life, I was deceived by the age difference in her face, thinking that she was just an annoying child who didn't know any better. Enough, Juno. Stop talking nonsense. Jaden suddenly stepped forward and reprimanded her. Juno's face immediately fell, looking very aggrieved. But just as she was about to act coquettishly towards Jaden, I grabbed Juno's wrist, threw this young hooligan away from me, and said sternly, "Juno, does being poor mean you don't have to pay compensation? Does being poor mean you can righteously refuse to take responsibility for your mistakes? Is that what your lousy school taught you?" Juno was stunned. After all, in my previous life, in order to pursue Jaden, I always deliberately tried to please her. I dealt with this matter for them, but Juno thought it was her own credit because she had found me as the rescuer. She said to Jaden behind my back, "Brother, you didn't even let me handle it. Look, it's solved now. Shirley has plenty of money. It's just a trifle for her." Only now did I realize that I had remembered this look of hers all my life. Juno opened her mouth slightly, twitched, and spoke in a much weaker tone, leaning towards the person behind her. "Shirley, what do you mean? Aren't you afraid of making my brother angry like this?" I said impatiently, "Stop talking about your brother all the time. If you don't have money, you can sell your blood or kidneys. I hope you'll use your brain and get out of here right now." "Shirley, don't speak so harshly." Jaden, who had been silent on the side, suddenly spoke with difficulty. "Sir, it was your sister who was rude first, right?" The little nurse beside finally couldn't help but interrupt. "Yes, other people's money belongs to them. Just because they're rich, they have to help you? Does being poor mean you're a rare species that needs to be protected? What kind of logic is that? If this girl marries into their family, it won't just be like helping the poor, but she'll also be in big trouble." The passers-by had been watching from a distance. At this moment, seeing someone had spoken up, they all gathered around to criticize the brother and sister. I folded my arms and watched the show, saying calmly, "Don't worry, everyone. I don't fancy her dear brother." Jaden's face turned pale and then red. He looked at me through the crowd with his face full of confusion and shock. But I got a sense of revenge pleasure from his expression. That old grandma who was hit and had a fracture didn't lack money at all. In my previous life, I played the role of a caring person and took good care of the grandma for over a month and even forced a lot of money on her to settle this matter. This wasn't a trivial matter. Jaden really needed my help today. But this time, I won't be so stupid anymore. I wanted to leave. Jaden leaned forward, his voice urgent. Surely. In the past, I would be overjoyed whenever I heard him call me. But at this moment, I hated him so much. I lowered my eyes as if I couldn't hear him and turned around to leave. I had been in love with Jaden for 10 years, starting from the second year of senior high school and ending with a car accident 3 years after getting married. I think many girls may have a boy as bright as a star in their school days. The one hidden in the bottom of my heart was Jaden. During the heavy snow in the second year of senior high school, I fainted at school due to low blood sugar. It was he who carried me to the infirmary. When I woke up, he had already left. I only remembered the warm breath of the boy with a slight pant. The school doctor told me that he was in a hurry to give a speech under the national flag, so he left first and asked the school doctor to take good care of me. Since then, I began to pay attention to Jaden. His family was poor, but he was always clean. There was a fresh fragrance of detergent on his shirt. He had a pair of phoenix eyes, his hair was a bit fluffy, he wore a white shirt, was tall and thin, and had excellent grades. The boy who should have been bright didn't like to smile. His lips were tightly pursed, giving people an eye-catching yet distant feeling. The feelings of a young love grew vigorously. I tried hard to get into the same university as him. On the way after his classes in the evening, I said to him, Jaden, I like you. Can I have the right to have dinner with you every day? He walked past me, his voice indifferent. Yeah, I got it. I was stunned on the spot. But then I saw him stop in the distance, turn around to look at me, and pretended to be impatient and said, Aren't you coming? At that time, I thought that he loved me. Surely. The tone was getting more and more urgent. It was Jaden who had chased after me. I stopped and looked at him from a distance, only to find that he was a bit unsteady and looked flustered all over. He looked at me, his voice trembling. Surely, don't you want to help me? I sneered. Who do you think you are? Are you worthy of me sacrificing myself like this? Jaden, how dare you? No. He interrupted, I didn't mean that. Jaden's eyes suddenly turned red, with pain and grievance that couldn't be concealed. Did Jaden show such emotions towards me in my previous life? I was a bit dazed. He was always restrained and forbearing, whether he was happy or unhappy, he wouldn't tell me and always made me guess. He just wanted to ask me whether I was willing to help him regardless of this matter. In his mind, my answer should at least be, I want to help you but I'm really powerless. I deliberately gave him an ambiguous answer to make him angry. Jaden was very hard to coax. Now that I don't want to love him anymore, he's just being ungrateful. When we were in college, we confirmed our relationship. No matter what I bought for him, he would accept it and then ask about the price and transfer the money to me. Once, near his birthday, he won a gold medal in a competition and was very likely to be recommended for further study in the future. I gave him a laptop worth nearly 20,000 yuan. He was modeling in the school computer room. After seeing the gift, he smiled a little and asked casually, how much did it cost? Over 4,000 yuan. I peeked at his expression and said guiltily. He nodded and said just one word, okay. 2 months later, just when I was about to forget about this matter, he transferred 5,000 yuan to me. However, soon his poverty identification was reported by other classmates. The classmates brought up his computer and said that he had a luxurious lifestyle. That I didn't know at that time that such an outstanding Jaden actually didn't have a good relationship with others. I immediately told those people that the computer was a gift from me. At that time, I didn't realize the seriousness of the matter and thought that everything would be resolved quickly. It wasn't until I went to find Jaden and heard others talking about him in front of him. I thought he was a bookworm who wanted to change his fate through studying. Turns out he's already figured it out and really took a shortcut that would otherwise take decades. Do you think he'll reach his peak right after graduation? Oh my God, my filter for the cold and aloof male god is shattered. What's there to pity? He's found a sugar mommy and a long-term meal ticket. How dare he use our taxpayers' money? Jaden clenched his fists tightly, and even crumpled the test papers in his hand. I stared hard at every person who spoke viciously. Jaden has been registered in the poverty file. He meets the poverty conditions. If you continue to be so malicious, I'll report it to the counselor. The school will give classmate Jaden justice, and those who spread rumors won't end well either. Some people started whispering again. Although they lowered their voices, it was still audible. She's not someone to mess with. She's about to use her influence to suppress others. She has the Juanha law firm behind her. Her uncle is the top criminal defense lawyer in China. Who dares to offend her? I wanted to say more, but suddenly Jaden said sharply, "Stop talking." I was startled and subconsciously reached out to pull him, but I saw that he showed an expression of disgust towards me. He said word by word, "I won't participate in the poverty identification anymore. Is that okay?" I wasn't sure whether he was saying this to others besides me or including me as well. He stormed off, leaving me alone in the middle of the storm. Then I couldn't find him. I heard from his roommate that he took another part-time job and was hardly ever at school. When I found him again, he vomited all over himself. He came back from work to study, went out to eat after studying, and got drunk outside in the middle of the night. I went to help him, but he pushed me away. "Get away. We're not from the same world." I knew that I had hurt his pride. I was so worried that I didn't know what to do and could only keep apologizing. He was sober for just a moment, and then he became as limp as a pile of mud, allowing me to send him to the apartment near the school. He huddled in my arms, reeking of alcohol, and actually cried. This was the first time that I truly saw this man with red eyes in front of me. He sobbed and called my name. With both his first name and last name, again and again. Shirley, Shirley. Later, he sold apples during Christmas and earned tens of thousands of yuan. In his senior year, he gave me an apple. I found a pure gold ring inside it. I looked at him in disbelief. He seemed to think that I might dislike it. He said first, rather awkwardly, "Do you want it? If not, I'll take it back." You see, it was such a man who had never said that he loved me, but I was so stupid that I still married him. For Jaden's parents had an accident at the construction site. Since he could remember, he had lived with his grandfather and sister. He and Juno had depended on each other since childhood and had deep affection as siblings. Juno always skipped classes to be a stumbling block between Jaden and me. She would follow us to have buffets and go to amusement parks together. She ate the egg-and-daz that I bought for her with her eyes red and said, "Sister-in-law, you're so lucky." Jaden would always subsidize me for 2 meals worth of money, and I always thought that Juno was just young and ignorant. I looked at this little girl with the thought that Jaden doted on his sister. Until this little girl became greedier and naughtier. After getting married, she frequently visited our home and secretly took the mangosteens and cherries that I bought home. She put the pecans that I bought in her pocket. Her clothes were flashy but not practical, and the pocket burst and the food rolled all over the floor. I knew that she had been poor when she was young, so she had developed bad habits, but when I wanted to discipline her, she would run to Jaden, implying that I disliked her. Jaden entered my uncle's law firm under my recommendation. My uncle was notoriously strict. Although Jaden was smart, he was still very tired from work. After hearing about it, he transferred money to Juno several times and didn't mention it to me. It was a friend from the law firm who accidentally overheard the conversation between the siblings and told me about it. So every time Juno came, I gave her a shopping card. But she wasn't satisfied and started to secretly use my cosmetics. I hated it the most when others used my personal and private things. I put on a cold face and scolded her. Juno pointed at my nose, very emotional with vicious eyes. "Does being rich mean you can look down on others? So what if we're poor? We're better off eating chaff than you. You're just lucky, aren't you?" I was extremely helpless. "Juno, that's not what I meant." Jaden came back at this moment. Juno was always like a little girl who couldn't grow up, hiding behind Jaden. She was on the verge of crying. "Brother, I just haven't used nice things since I was a kid, so I thought sister-in-law's things were nice. Brother, will you also dislike me like sister-in-law?" Jaden looked at me expressionlessly and said softly to his sister, "No." I immediately got angry. "Jaden, what do you mean by that?" But he said, "I'll talk to her. You didn't lose much." "How much was it?" "I'll transfer the money to you." After that, Jaden probably said something to Juno and her visits became less frequent. Jaden went on a trip to Yunnan and brought a set of ethnic costumes for Juno. Juno happily came to pick it up and excitedly put it on to show me. "Brother always knows what I like." "Sister-in-law, do you have one? Yours must be more exquisite than mine, right?" I clenched my fists because Jaden had said to me, "You have everything." I'm not good at choosing either. The business trip was short, so I didn't buy anything suitable for you. Next time if you want something, tell me in advance, and it would be best if you could give me the link. I had always thought that I had a good temper, but this time I really couldn't bear it anymore. I got married to him right after graduation, thinking that I hadn't misjudged him and that I could warm his heart, but things didn't go as expected. My tolerance was so ridiculous that it could almost be described as being willing to degrade myself. I scolded Juno. Jaden's eyes were full of indifference, thinking that this quarrel was the same as countless previous quarrels, just the ignorance of a child and the wife making a fuss over nothing. I became hysterical and only then did he change from indifference to shock. "Surely, she's still just a child. Don't always be so idle and waste your time on nitpicking." Idle? Wasn't it because of him that I had been busy for so many years and needed to do in vitro fertilization? I looked at him with a cold heart. "She may be a child to you, but she should have the basic politeness and respect of an adult when facing me. She doesn't understand anything. Because Juno is just a born troublemaker." Juno shouted after hearing this, "You have such a bad temper. Who would like you? My brother won't like you either." A slap landed on Juno's face. It wasn't me who hit her. It was Jaden who hit her first. Juno was full of horror, her lips trembling, covering her face and crying, "Jaden, you're so heartless." Juno rushed out of the door and there was no news of her for 3 years. The relationship between Jaden and me also seemed to become estranged. 5 later, Juno came back home with a child in her arms. She got married without any warning and her husband was a gambler and an alcoholic. On our wedding anniversary, I finally got pregnant. I excitedly went to find Jaden. I accidentally answered his phone and the person on the other end asked, "Is this Song Zian's father? Your child has a fever in the kindergarten." My temple throbbed violently and then Jaden snatched the phone from me. He got up anxiously and wanted to leave. I grabbed his clothes, almost crying, and asked, "What's going on?" He couldn't avoid me in time and just hurriedly patted my head saying, "Don't think too much. It's Juno's child." It was only on that day that I learned that Jaden had taken the place of Juno's gambler husband and Juno's child called him father, and the teacher would call him for parents' meetings. I almost subconsciously followed him. It was pouring rain and Jaden held an umbrella for Juno who was carrying the child. Juno looked haggard and so fragile. The moment she saw Jaden, she burst into loud sobs. "It's all your fault. If that woman hadn't disliked me and you hadn't followed her to oppress me, I wouldn't have married randomly. Jaden, you didn't let me tell that woman that I'm not your biological sister, and I did as you said, didn't I? But I really like you so much. Why did you drive me away?" Jaden's face was terribly gloomy. "Enough, stop talking. Take Xiaoyan to the hospital first." Juno was being stubborn and refused to get into his car. Jaden raised his hand high as if he was going to hit her. But in the end, his hand landed gently, and when it brushed past Juno's cheek, it seemed more like a kind of comfort. I covered my stomach, feeling cold all over. The rain was heavy and my tears were fierce. I was distracted and got into a car accident. By the hospital bed, I used my last bit of strength, grabbed Jaden's hand like a fierce ghost and said, "I hate you." At this time my phone rang. It was my uncle on the other end of the phone, asking why the person I recommended hadn't shown up yet. "Uncle, I'm sorry for wasting your time. I misjudged him." There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then he said, "Okay, Shirley, take good care of yourself." I hung up the phone and then realized that Jaden was still standing beside me. He could hardly stand steadily, and there was indescribable pain in his eyes. He said, "Surely, you've also been reborn, right?" I raised my eyebrows and looked at him, and suddenly my heart ached. He stammered and said incoherently, "I came back to love you well, Shirley. It's always been you that I liked. Juno has always been just a sister. I really owe her. I didn't know you had also been reborn. I thought God had shown mercy and gave me a chance to start over and treat you well. Jaden was sincere. I'll change, Shirley. Let's live a good life this time. Get out of my life immediately." I hailed a taxi and left directly. 6. I applied for a 1-year suspension from school and went to LaSalle. At the foot of the pot. How could I lie to you about this? She's really dead. Her body sank into the sea with the boat. It can't be retrieved. He looked at me and said word by word as if making an oath, "I won't let her bully you anymore in the future." I looked at him almost pityingly. "I don't need your compensation or pity." "It's not compensation or pity. I like you, Shirley, Shirley. I can't lose you." Jaden looked at me with a face full of anxiety and uneasiness, almost humble to the bone, and carefully begged me like that. I remembered that just before I died in my previous life, he also begged me like this, pouring out the love that he had never expressed before. But it was already too late. You siblings have caused too much harm, like a black shadow lingering in my life. The realization came too late and there's no way to go back. Even if Juno died early in this life, there would be no chance for us to get back together. I shook my head expressionlessly, shook off his hand, and was extremely resolute, "Since you still remember. For the sake of our old friendship, I'll give you some face. Get out of my life immediately." I hailed a taxi and left directly. 6. I applied for a 1-year suspension from school and went to LaSalle. At the foot of the Potala Palace, I saw a man wearing Tibetan clothing and playing the guitar. The man seemed to be about my age, tall, with deep-set eyes and a high-nose bridge. The sunlight on the golden mountain made him look like a free and unrestrained god. I don't know why, but it felt as if we had known each other for a long time, so long that it was almost ethereal. The man was good-looking, and several girls asked for his WeChat, but he didn't give it to them, perhaps to show that he already had a girlfriend. There was a dark green lace hair tie on his wrist. I vaguely remembered that I had bought such a hair tie before. When our eyes met, he curled his lips and nodded at me with a smile, and my heart inexplicably trembled. I didn't expect that Jaden would follow me to LaSalle. To be honest, I couldn't clearly define my feelings for Jaden. Maybe I still loved him, but loving each other again was full of malice, and I felt uncomfortable from the bottom of my heart. So when he chased after me again, the main emotion I felt was annoyance. He just followed me all the way, like a child who had made a mistake and didn't dare to approach. When the evening sunset was almost gone, I finally said the first sentence. "What's wrong with your shoes?" Jaden looked happy and then looked at his shoes embarrassedly. There was only one left. It was squeezed off on the train. "Then why didn't you buy another pair?" He was honest and said, "I have no money left. I spent all my money to come to find you." I nodded as if I suddenly understood and commented, "Then you're so poor. You don't deserve precious me." Jaden's face immediately changed, becoming so humble. "Shirley, won't you forgive me?" "I don't believe it at all. How long are you going to be so stubborn?" I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Jaden, you're still deceiving yourself. Put away your ridiculous self-esteem. You don't deserve my love at all." Suddenly, Jaden rushed up and wanted to grab me, then hit me, scold me. I had an illusion that the next moment he grabbed me, he was going to kneel down. Kneeling down to me in this holy place, praying piously for mercy. I subconsciously stepped back. Suddenly, the man playing the guitar walked up in a few steps and gave Jaden a shoulder throw. I opened my eyes wide, and the man then bent down and whispered in my ear, "Do you need help, miss?" The warm breath made me daze for a moment. As if possessed by something, I loosely put my arm around the man's waist and tiptoed to kiss him. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jaden climb up from the ground in a mess, looking at me with a heartbroken and bleeding gaze. It started to rain. The man held an umbrella to shelter me from the rain, and Jaden just watched us in the rain. Jaden's eyes were dim, and he almost seemed crazy. "Why?" he asked. "Why? When I didn't treat you well, you loved me and couldn't be driven away no matter how hard I tried. But now that I really love you deeply and am willing to put down all my self-esteem and humbly beg you, you like someone else instead?" Blood oozed from the corner of Jaden's mouth. I don't know if it was from the fall just now or something else. He looked so fragile and pitiful, like a stray dog. He really had no money left. "Surely, are you taking revenge on me?" I shook my head. "We should both start anew, Jaden. You didn't cherish it when I was good to you. Now that we've let go, don't come to pester me anymore." Maybe it was cruel, but I still said that sentence. "Jaden, don't be so spineless." I threw several thousand yuan at him. Before I could say anything, I was pulled away from the Padala palace by the man. The rain was pattering down. The man held an umbrella for me, just like the shade of a tree that helped me fend off most of the cold. Suddenly, he said, "Come and play with me. I'm a fox on a planet. I'm very sad. The important things can't be seen with the eyes." My body stiffened, and I looked at the man. The man was wearing a black windbreaker. He took off his sunglasses, revealing his handsome face, and smiled at me with his eyes curved. "Long time no see, Shirley." 7. It was him. I was shocked. In disbelief, I asked, "Your eyes are cured?" He smiled again and said, "Yeah, they're cured." I was very happy, but soon I remembered an extremely embarrassing thing. I had long forgotten his name. After thinking for a long time, I still asked, "Well, what's your name again?" The man's eyes dimmed for a moment, but soon a gleam returned to them. He said, "Ethan. Ethan Jiang." Right, his name was Ethan. When I was a child, I lived at my uncle's house for a few years, and it was in Taipei at that time. Ethan's family was a wealthy local family. Ethan was born out of wedlock to his mother. The local customs were conservative, and he and his mother were shunned by the family. His uncle, Shijing, was a good friend of my uncle. When Ethan was a child, he couldn't see, and he had a bad temper. He was cowardly towards others, but he dared to tell his mother to get out. I couldn't stand him when I was a child. Although his mother really always got up too late in the morning, which made him late for school and forgot to pick him up in the evening. I pushed him onto a small chair and warned him to be filial. I also said, "I'll take you to school and pick you up from school in the future, but you have to promise me that you'll turn over a new leaf and be a good person." He couldn't see anything and looked around blankly in the air. I covered his eyes and he grabbed my hand and said in a whiny voice, "Okay." I picked him up and dropped him off at school for 3 years in an absolutely tough manner, and also read the whole book, The Little Prince, to him. Then I ran away before he grew up enough to beat me. I just hoped that he wouldn't remember the past. I said sheepishly, "Thank you for what happened today." The stone steps were slippery and long. He put his arm around me in a protective gesture. "Don't run around anymore. Hold on to me, hold on to Ethan." I was like a little chick protected under its mother's wings, but he was Ethan. He didn't intend to talk. To ease my own embarrassment, I could only find some topics. "Have you been in Lhasa all these years? Or have you been back to Nannan? I heard that my uncle and your uncle had a feud for a while." He was silent for a moment. He looked both amused and helpless. "Surely, we were in the same grade. I studied at Nannan Middle School, went to Harvard for university, and worked in Nannan." Under the street lamp his expression was obscure, as if he came from another faraway place. There seemed to be some kind of indescribable resentment in his deep eyes. "Surely, we've been in the same city for a full 10 years. I was so shocked that I almost forgot to breathe. I tried desperately to search in my mind. 10 years? A trace of doubt flashed through my heart. Just as I was about to carefully calculate our time and space coordinates, I found that we had already arrived at the small courtyard where he lived. He went in first, turned on the light, and said, "Shirley, come here." The next moment a butterfly landed on my fingertip. As Ethan called me, another butterfly seemed to sense something and landed on my shoulder. I moved my fingers slightly and the butterflies fluttered and danced. I don't know why, but I felt that these butterflies seemed to know me. Let them out to move around a bit. It's not good to keep them cooped up all the time. I turned to look and saw that Ethan had opened a crystal tank. Inside were many origami stars, as well as green pupae nestled on the leaves, and some colorful butterflies. Suddenly Ethan pulled me over and gently placed his hand on my head. I was so nervous that my breathing stopped. Ethan's eyes were filled with deep affection that I couldn't understand. I don't know why, but I didn't dislike him. The next moment he smoothed my hair and tied it up with the hair tie on his wrist. He said gently, "There you go," returning it to its rightful owner. Seeing my stunned expression, he couldn't help but scrape the tip of my nose. "Forgotten, huh? At Nanan Middle School, you fell in the snow, and I took you to the infirmary. You ungrateful little thing. I was late for my speech because of you. It's okay if you don't repay me, but you didn't even say thank you." It took 2 lifetimes to realize that I had mistaken the person. I had given my love to the wrong person, Jaden. The people around were afraid of scaring me, so they turned on another light and went to get me some fruits and food. I chased after him and my heart was full of regret for the part of life that I had missed. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ethan's voice lowered. "I couldn't keep pestering you just because of that. Surely, if you want to love Jaden, you might as well love me. My love for you is pure." I only reached his chest. He bent over slightly to look at me and I felt that warm breath again. Ethan was glowing with a soft light, like an immortal butterfly. Jaden was given a disciplinary warning by the school. After graduating from undergraduate studies, he didn't go to graduate school. Although he worked hard, he wasn't good at flattering others. Without the resume of Junha law firm and the guidance of my uncle, he lived an ordinary life as an ordinary office worker in a very ordinary law firm. As for Juno, I heard that she was still pestering Jaden, but Jaden always refused to see her. I had no more intersections with them in this life. I married Ethan because he told me to hold on to him and not run around anymore. On the wedding night, I looked at those colorful origami stars and suddenly had an idea to open a few of them. Inside were elegant handwriting. "You surely don't remember me, but I remember you. In the first year at Nanan Middle School, she didn't recognize me. In the second year at Nanan Middle School, she didn't recognize me. In the first year at Harvard, she confessed her love to the boy she had a crush on. Still didn't recognize me." I walked out of the room to find Ethan. He wiped away the tears on my face and summoned up his courage to ask, "Shirley, are you regretting it?" I threw myself into his arms. "Ethan, I love you, and I'm sorry.